So we're talking about coping with job loss, and we've already covered off the first 4 emotional states in the part 1 video. So please watch this if you haven't already done so. In this second part, we're going to look at the 3 additional emotional states and how they can be managed, and then we'll finish by looking at how you can then move forward with a renewed sense of hope. Drawing on some of the research of Professor Sally Maitlis, a psychotherapist and renowned expert on sense-making, particularly within the context of job loss. The next emotional state is bargaining. Not all will experience this, but it's another defence mechanism that's evidenced when you start constructing if only or what if statements. In essence, you're bargaining with your past self, hoping to alter already unfolded events. If only I'd put more effort into building that particular relationship. What if I'd worked longer hours? If only they'd give back my job, I'd promise to perform better. Perhaps they'll take me back if I offer to cut my pay, etc., etc. Often you'll continually replay small mistakes in your mind, consider what could have been done differently, and wish you could go back in time and stop things from happening. Or you might actively resist the inevitability of the situation by working harder, taking on more overtime and trying to prove your value again. You'll try and put everything right that's been wrong. You're willing to do anything to avoid accepting that it's over. This is of course understandable. You may feel like you're standing on the edge of an assumed abyss, desperately clinging on to what you know because it's preferred to major disruption, unwelcome change and fear of the unknown. Bargaining can be a seductive and illusionary loop to be stuck in because you perpetuate a belief that you still have some control and that things are salvageable, whereas in fact, remaining focused on the past limits you from moving forward and embracing change. But it can only briefly distract from the reality which will inevitably come crashing down. You'll soon realise that there's nothing that could have been done, or even if it could, it's now unfortunately too late. As with any trauma, job loss can undermine and disrupt your core sense of identity, leaving you feeling adrift, rejected and uncertain about the future. Depression can encompass emptiness, fogginess, yearning, insomnia, appetite disruption, as well as a lack of motivation, hope, self-confidence and a desire to socialise. You might also feel intense sadness and even despair. Common symptomatic thoughts include, I'll never find another job, I'm too old, too overqualified, too underqualified, too useless, I'm doomed to fail everywhere, so what's the point? However, like other emotional states associated with loss, depression is quite a natural response. And since grief is a process of healing rather than being viewed as a sign of weakness, depression should be seen as a step within the journey. So allow yourself some time to grieve, but try not to dwell too long before you initiate some action. Dr. Robert Leahy, author of The Worry Cure, he wrote that you should validate your right to feel miserable. You're a human being. Once you've given your emotions space to exist, you can start to see the big picture more clearly, enabling you to act in ways that will help you and your career. Depression is problematic when you find yourself stuck in a downward, self-perpetuating spiral of negativity. Many of the practical steps already highlighted to aid with anxiety and anger will also help with depression. In addition, here are 4 other things that may assist. Structured routine. Losing a daily routine is an often overlooked aspect of job loss. Studies have shown a connection between mental health and the structured, purposeful use of time. So you may find it useful to establish a new routine encompassing job hunting tasks, volunteering, hobbies, exercise, connecting with friends, meditation, and going for a walk, etc. It can also help if you set reasonable goals and break the day into smaller, more manageable tasks. Rather than spending 100% of time on job hunting, pick out a couple of related smaller things like updating your LinkedIn profile or researching a company that you'd like to target. Combine these activities with some non-related stuff and scheduled breaks to maintain a good sense of balance, variety and fun. Nutrition is also very important. Try to get plenty of restful sleep, and even if you find that your appetite diminishes, make a concerted effort to retain a healthy diet and drink plenty of water because dehydration can increase the levels of cortisol in your body. This is the stress hormone. Conversely, avoid turning to alcohol, drugs and junk food, all of which might temporarily bury emotions and cause more issues. Social interaction is also important. Don't suffer in isolation. Reach out to and openly share your feelings with family and friends that will help lift you up. Much will have shifted during this intense period, so take comfort in what remains stable, which is usually these relationships. Draw on the support of others to help build a new faith in who you are and believe that it will get better. Studies have shown that positive social interaction can greatly improve your mental health, longer-term motivational levels, and even lead to quicker re-employment. And also do check out the Career Atoms discussion forum, as we want to create a mutually supportive environment where you can anonymously share thoughts and feelings and receive some constructive advice. You could also look at expressive writing. Some people find it useful to keep a daily written journal, and expressive writing takes the concept of verbalising feelings further, and it's been successfully utilised by psychotherapists since the mid-1980s. It involves you taking 15 to 20 minutes on at least 3 or 4 consecutive days to write about your deepest feelings and thoughts regarding job loss, or indeed any other major trauma. Clinical research has evidenced a link with physical and emotional health improvements, and a 2017 study of recently unemployed professionals demonstrated that 53% of those undertaking expressive writing were re-employed in the 8 months following the study, compared to 24% of those that wrote about more mundane things and 14% of those who didn't do any writing at all. Psychologists aren't certain why expressive writing appears to bring about positive results, but there's suggestions that translating trauma into words helps you organise your thoughts and make meaning out of your experience. It might also provide a sense of control, increase acceptance of the experience, and dampen neural activity in the threat area of the brain. In case this interests you, I've included some further information in the Embracing Change section on the Career Atoms website. If you feel that there's little hope, recognise that what you're actually experiencing is a temporary loss of access to hopeful feelings. And this distinction is really, really important. However, if you find yourself stuck in a rut of depression, please do seek professional help from a medical practitioner or therapist. I've also included some contact numbers for relevant UK agencies and support lines in the website FAQs. If up until now we've covered what might be deemed as negative emotions, in contrast, acceptance may be thought of as a more positive state and an upward turn in the journey. You shouldn't, however, necessarily expect that happiness will have replaced all other emotions at this point, because acceptance is much more about reaching a point of understanding, acknowledgement, and reconciliation with the reality and implications of job loss. It's a place where you begin to come to terms with everything and you can start to put the pieces of your life back together again. Often, acceptance won't just suddenly pop up as the very last emotional state for everyone. Many describe a sense of this acceptance at the very beginning, which continues to gradually grow as time passes. Each person's degree of acceptance can also vary. For example, you may have a fairly resigned attitude of surrender, recognising that there's no turning the clock back, so you may as well reluctantly look for a new job. Or it could be that as the clouds start to lift, you experience some more good days compared to bad days, and you've come to terms with the possibility that you'll be okay without your last employer. Some may feel a greater level of optimism and hope as they begin to think positively and creatively. They're confident that they have a lot to offer another employer, so they're going to do all they can to help find them. David Kessler aptly described the state of acceptance. He says, "Instead of denying our feelings, we listen to our needs. We move, we change, we grow, we evolve. We may start to reach out to others. We invest in our friendships and in our relationships with ourselves. We begin to live again. For now, hope lies with small accomplishments, all of which contribute to and lead towards even greater hope that everything will indeed be okay in the end." But acceptance shouldn't automatically be an end point of recovery from trauma. Kessler more recently received permission from the Kubler-Ross family to add meaning as an additional stage of grief, and he believed that this is to be found in what happens after loss. Which is to say, what does the difficult experience you've gone through mean to you? How will it change you? What actions can you take to move forward? What future can you create? Sensemaking is all about figuring out and deriving meaning from what's happened. Professor Sally Maitlis highlights that following loss, this process can help underpin personal growth and the creation of an enriched, expanded identity in future. A lot of her research involved professional musicians and dancers whose work was intrinsically linked with their sense of identity, but for whom health issues meant that careers were unexpectedly cut short. Some struggled to come to terms with the loss and were trapped in the past, continually focusing on the negative aspects and questioning why it had happened to them. They were unable to look forward and redefine their identity in any way beyond being frustrated musicians who could no longer play. Others that came to terms with their disrupted identities and took a much more positive and action-oriented approach to sense-making were able to create a basis for future growth, becoming conductors, writers, physiotherapists, and even web designers. This was made possible via 2 key steps, the first of which is cognitive in nature and involves some reflection, evaluation, interpretation, and reframing. So take time to fully consider your recent work, your career, who you are, who you want to be, but do so in a way that shines a light on your skills, qualities, and attributes. Ask yourself the following questions. Did you love your last job and was it fulfilling? Could your skills and attributes be better utilised with another employer, or indeed in a different career altogether? What other qualities do you have that you'd like to develop and utilise more? What kinds of employers would potentially be a stronger cultural fit and better aligned to your personal values? Could you set up your own business or even take early retirement? It's easy to ignore soul-searching questions and quickly jump at the first option that arises. And I appreciate that for some, economic reasons will dictate that this may be necessary. But if your circumstances afford you the time, utilise it and reflect on your feelings. Assess what you want, think creatively, and explore all opportunities. You may discover parts of yourself that you barely knew existed. And with these discoveries come new ways of understanding who you might become and the work you might do. What was initially perceived as a devastating loss might just be the catalyst for a long-needed transformational change. Very much like the heart attack survivor who now positively appraises and reframes this experience as a wake-up call. As you may start to see some new options, you eventually look back and perceive your job loss very, very differently. In addition to the evaluative process outlined, Dr. Maitlis proposes that a key part of forging a new future also involves practical sense-making actions which can further reveal new skills, interests and possibilities that you didn't know existed. In her Harvard Business Review article, she talks about things which can help give you an embodied sense of who you might become and the work you might do. She talks of experimenting and integrating, which means that following the cognitive steps of sense-making, you'll gain additional insights when you start to take experimental actions. You assess the results and then you integrate these, all of which over time can lead to some personal growth. Dr. Maitlis describes that new career paths are often discovered, sometimes inadvertently, by taking small experiments which may incrementally contribute to new avenues. So be creative and open to undertake a number of steps, often without an obvious re-employment agenda. Help friends, develop hobbies, volunteer, reach out to your network, contact people you've lost touch with, attend a talk, join a networking group, research a different career, or take on an interim role. There's plenty of opportunities. Here's 3 quick sense-making examples from people I've known who have created new futures following their job loss. After talking to a friend that worked in finance, a plasterer shone a light on the systematic, detail-focused and quite repetitive nature of his work. He remembered that he enjoyed maths at school and he saw how accounting might be a new viable option. So he went back to college, passed the relevant exams and forged a completely new employment path. A recruiter I worked with reflected that she'd inadvertently fallen into human resources and her real passion was interior design. So when she was made redundant, she took some online courses in interior design. She built up a portfolio by helping friends with some free consultancy. She set up a website and she's never looked back. An IT manager I knew reflected that he didn't enjoy the management aspects of his job. What he really missed was the hands-on technical problem-solving elements. He acknowledged that he'd moved to a path that he didn't really want to be on, so he created a new future and reinvented himself as a senior technical consultant and an expert at solving complex IT issues for clients. But it isn't even all about major job or career changes. I've also known many whose sense-making process has provided greater clarity on their desire to continue doing what they love, but this next time with an employer that was much better suited to them and their preferred styles of working. As a result, they were able to undertake a much more focused search and find the right company for them. It's common to hear people report that whilst very difficult at the time, in retrospect, job loss has ended up being very positive as it created conditions that compelled them to search for new meaning, ultimately forging a more fulfilling and enriching job than the one that they'd lost. It's also suggested that overcoming adversity can lead to post-traumatic growth and an expanded identity, since you come out the other side with a new understanding of your ability to dig deep and demonstrate strength and resourcefulness in the face of difficulty. In conclusion, it ultimately doesn't matter whether you experience just a couple of the emotional states outlined, or all of them, but in a completely different pattern. It's more critical to recognise that what you may be experiencing is perfectly normal, and once managed, you'll be in a much stronger position to undertake the kind of sense-making that can lead to an enriched and fulfilling future. Thank you for watching.